Okay, we'll create our index method, and normally you would just do rat.all, and this will just pull all your rats. But what we can do with this gem is just add page, and then we'll have to pass in a page variable here. So just like you do with, say, like getting your ID from a URL, we can add a private tag. Call this set params, and we can just say page equals params page. So this is just like as if you were finding an ID, but what it's looking for is in your URL. We play with Postman here. Anytime at the end of the URL you add a question mark, it's looking at this as a variable. So if we call it page, we can pass it a value, and this will basically just pull it from your URL, and Ruby on Rails knows that that at page is equal to 1. A little bit of error handling is if you want, like, let's say your front end does a call and doesn't specify page in their URL, you can just add like this or ternary. And if there's no page in the URL, you can just give it page 1. Another thing, if we look at this Kaminari gem, is there's actually a bunch of like little methods you can pass on. I don't really find a use for a lot of these, but I do use per. So if we wanted to add another param, we can just call it per or per page. And same thing. The default so this per value, sorry, I didn't explain, it's just the amount of items it'll pull for each page. So the default's 25, but if we wanted to do more or less, we could say 10, or if we want our front end to be able to define how many, then they can just use this at per page param in there. So what do we call it? Per. They can just use this in their URL. And we just have to tag on there. So now when we do our call, I need to API/rats. I wonder if it's that slash. Okay, so our call isn't working. Let me just make sure my server's running. And I need to call this set params. So we can just do action set params. And if you were doing like your other CRUD action, you probably only wanted to do it only index. Since I'm only defining index, I just won't have that. Now, I'm also not rendering JSON. So render our rats. Cool. Now, this is sort of ugly, but we can see we rendered from 521 to 530. So we're getting that 10. If we wanted to do 25, we now get 521 to 545. So that's all the setup we need on our backend to be able to set up either pagination or infinite scroll. So now let's go to our client here. And setting it up, there's a lot of moving parts for the infinite scroll to work. So I just take it at like normal at first, and then just sort of add things step by step. So my process is I'll just do like normal. Normal get request here. I'm going to make this function called get initial rats rather than just get rats. Find that here. We can set our rats. And just to make sure we're getting them, for now, I'll just do some.stringify rats. So let's see if that works. It does. We're getting our initial rats. We didn't have to define our URL params because we have these default ones. And now, because there's so many moving parts, before I implement the infinite scroller, I'm now going to, first I'm going to map over these rats instead of stringifying them. Let's do, let's not map. This. That's like that. So now we have our rats. And instead of implementing the infinite scroll right away, I'm just going to throw a button right here. We'll just do more rats. And we'll call a function here, rats. More rats. So let's type it out. There'll be another call. You can use the same function, but I find it's just easier to split them up. And since the logic is usually different between them, instead of having like ternaries and a bunch of ifs in one, I think it looks better to have your more and your initial function. So that's why I do it that way. But let's, same thing, try catch. Console that error. We'll just steal this. This time we will have to throw in our page param. So same thing, API rats. This question mark is just telling Rails that anything after this is going to be like extra params and not part of the route. So we can just do our page equals page. And for now, I'll just pass in a page. And we'll call our more rats. So in order to make it so the new rats that we get don't replace these rats, we're going to use the use effect setter has an option to pass in function instead of just data. And what the function does is the first param is the previous state. And the second is what you're doing to manipulate the previous state. So the syntax is kind of strict here, but we'll just add, we're setting it to a new array, but we're just going over our previous state. And then we'll go over our res.data to just append this res.data to the end of previous state. So let's see here. We scroll down, we have our more rats button. And if we click it, we get more rats. Right now, since I'm passing in 2, it'll always just be the second page of rats over and over. We're probably getting errors because of it. Yeah. So instead of this 2, what we'll do is I'm not going to pass in anything, but I'm going to make some page state. Let page. I'm going to have the initial value be 2 because I'm not even passing a page into my initial rats. So the first time this will be called, it'll want to look for page 2. And then after we set our rats, we can just set our page to, I'll use the same helper function here. Page +1. Because React doesn't like if I do like plus. So now we can scroll down, more rats, and we get our rats that way. So now that we have all of our parts required for the infinite scroll to work, what I do, there's like a bunch of infinite scroll components you can use. This one I find works more often than the others. So this is the one I downloaded and imported, and you'll see it takes tons of like props and params you need to pass it, but I find it works just well. So if we use this infinite scroll, this works like a div. You can like add some styling to it like a div, like sizing and stuff. So we'll just wrap our map in this. I can get rid of our button now. And this, we take a look. It wants the length of our items. So we'll just pass in data length. So that's dot length. And then it wants a function for getting more data. So that's why I split it up into the more rats. So we can call our next, and it will be more rats. This has more. For now, we'll hard code it to true, but it's just telling the component that once we get to a certain point in our scroll, that it should look for more rats from our function. Loader and end message. These are just, you can pass in components here or just do some simple HTML, but the loader will, once you get to the bottom, if it's still loading, it'll just show this, and then the end message will show, once you get to the end, it'll show this tag. And then I'm going to skip these for now. But now we take a look at our rats. Let's see if this works. Cool. So right now our infinite scroll is working, but there is some cleanup we can still do. So sorry, I'm going to get to the bottom real quick. right now, because this has more is hard coded to true, we'll never see our end message. And so maybe users will think it's just stuck loading. So what we'll want to do is find a way for our app to determine if we're out of rats in our database. And the way I'll do this is I'm going to set some more state here. Initially have this be true. Excuse me. And then the way, if we look back at our Kaminari gem, something I find useful is it has this .count. So like right now, if we did, if I did like rats.length, it would give me the 25 I'm getting per page, but we can just look at rat.count. And if we want to tell our front end how much we have total in the database, so it can just have that information to know, can just manipulate our JSON a bit here, like this, comma. So now our app will break because we did mess with our JSON, but we could just go to these, and instead of res.data, it'll be res.data.rats. You can sort of look at that. Console log res and just comment this stuff out for now. So yeah, you can mess with your Rails backend. You don't have to. That's why, sometimes when you use other APIs, it'll be res.data.data or other things like that. If you want to pass in more information that's not strictly in your database by using Rails backend, you can manipulate the JSON like this, which I think is useful. So now we are getting our count. So I'll set some more state. Start 0. And on our initial, since we really only need to set this once, set counts to data. And then here, we can say if our rats dot length is greater than count, or sorry, rather, also greater than or equal to count. Well, sorry, no, let's say less than count. We'll set our page else. We will set has more. So let's go back to our scroll. And we'll just get to the bottom again. Oh, I forgot to do. Oh, that's right there. Maybe I should have done 200 rats, but that's okay. Get there. Cool. Now that's just a little better UI. So yeah, that's the gist of setting it up. I have a lot of extra time, so maybe let's take a look at these other things we can do. We can look at, these have like these refresh props, which is kind of cool. So let's play with these a little. Right here. So let's see. So let's just look at these props and see what they're pretty self-explanatory. It wants a function to refresh. I assume this pull down to refresh with no argument is just stating that if you pull down, it should do these things. And then this is a number. I'm sure it's just the amount of pixels you pull down before it refreshes. And then, of course, these are just showing what it will say to you. So this dot refresh won't work because we're in a functional component. So we can do window dot location dot reload. This will reload the whole page, which might not be the functionality you want. If you wanted, you could create a function that just clears your rats and then redoes your get initial rats. That would probably make more sense, but I'll just reload it for now. And this is a anonymous function. Cool. Let's just see if that works. On mobile, it's kind of working. It looks like it's working now. So cool. We have that. Another one I like is, let's see where it is. Yeah, I can take this height. So one thing is you may not want your map to like scroll with the whole page. Like say this is just a component on the side and I don't want it when I scroll down to look at rats, it like scrolls down the rest of my page too. If we want to mess with that, we can just give this a height. We'll say 600 pixels. And now let's refresh that. And now this won't like bring my whole page down if I want to have some like stagnant information on the sides, or if this is on the side or wherever. So yeah, I think that's just about everything. There are tons of props you can play with, but I will just slack out this component. If you want to install it, you can use yarn as well. You don't have to use npm. But let me slack that out. And does anyone have any questions?